And that's just crazy again in 2017, December, through Kate Kelly, through my excommunication, through Jeremy's, through all the excommunications, all of the podcasts that had come out, Infants on Thrones, Your Polygamy, all that stuff, the Gospel Topics essays, CES letter. We're talking 4 years after all that Hans Mattson stuff. And that's the truth. More than not, there are these Orthodox Mormon couples, affluent, educated, living in the bubble, oblivious to all this stuff that we think is so significant, so important, so big. You were just one of tens of thousands of Orthodox Mormon couples, oblivious to everything and locked in the bubble.
Totally oblivious. So I'm reading this and I'm like, and I'm kind of like, you knew I was reading it?
Early on. You told me early
But
on.
I think and we'll get into that, but 150 pages, boom, done. And then like 2 days later,
So you read the whole thing in a
day.
What was that like?
Well, that was just
Talk
the
us through
beginning. My heart's racing. I'm like, no. Like,
Which things?
all of it. I didn't know anything.
Pick three.
Polyandry,
Which is?
marrying women who are already married.
Joseph Smith
Marrying women who are already married,
Okay.
young girls, 14-year-old, his stepdaughter, essentially, that he was caring for. Book of Abraham, Kinderhook plates, the multiple First Vision accounts, that one was hidden for 30 years, anachronisms, source material. Nothing. I didn't know any of it. Nothing. Blacks in the priesthood, hidden information about nothing. I didn't know anything.
And what kept you from just like, I'm feeling a bad feeling reading this, so I'm going to stop reading, or this all can't be true. It must be all lies. What kept you from like flipping the fuse and shutting it all off?
Well, I was always told that the church was true. So if something's true, then it shouldn't be able to be harmed by investigation. You know what I mean? Like, so why would I be scared? Like, why wouldn't I want to learn about anything? Like, I want, that's just how I am in my life. You know, I want to learn. And so, no, I just, all it did was make me think, okay, that's crazy. I need to read more and more and more. And so that was just the beginning. CES-lette, letter to my wife, the whole website, Follow the Prophets. And then I would go deep, deep, deep into, the witnesses and their lives. You know, what were their lives? What was the history? What was the background? So I went into every vein: Melchizedek priesthood, Aaronic priesthood, visitations, Joseph's life before the Book of Mormon, the Golden Pot. You name it, like Mormon origins. But early on, Cody, that happened over months and months and months. But early on, Cody was not quite on the same page.
Well, that didn't happen over months and months and months.
Well, the incessant reading started the moment I started reading the CES letter and didn't stop for months.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. But you're, okay, right. So this is happening in December. I'm at work all day, and she's at home reading all day. Can't put the book or computer down because she's just devouring it, and I'm at work pretty much oblivious to what's going on until she sits me down and says, you've got to see this stuff, you've got to read this stuff, and you're not going to believe some of these things. And I had heard of the CES letter. I think at one point I even looked it up online and maybe like high level, like browsed a couple topics, but never read anything in depth. And so when Leah told me she was reading it, I knew it was anti-Mormon, is what I knew. And so I I didn't get upset with her, but I just said, you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful. You need to also study the other side, because there is another good side. This is the bad side. You need to also study the other side at the same time so that you can look at both sides of the issues. And, but still, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I wasn't willing to look at anything because it was anti-Mormon.
And again, I don't mean to kind of belabor the point, but here we have a husband and wife who trust each other with the deepest intimacies that you could ever trust each other with. Emotional side. They have children together. They share bank accounts, I'm assuming. They share everything. They share a bed. And one member of the marriage has now stumbled upon information that's accurate, that's factual, that's irrefutable, that's even backed up by the church itself. Now her world is coming apart. She's unraveling and melting down, obsessed. And the husband, and this isn't you, this is every story we've ever heard, is like, I can't learn that. I can't go there with you. Stay away, right? It is complete. You're married.
Yeah, it was so difficult. I don't know how spouses do it for years and years and years. I was such a mess. I couldn't, what way was up? It was like the world was falling. And I reached out to my cousin because I had heard that I had a cousin who left. And I reached out to him.
Okay, wait. You didn't reach out to Kelty.
I did reach out to Kelty.
Okay, but at the beginning? I'm just saying sometimes
I did.
Sometimes weird things happen where you still won't reach out to the sister. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
I reached out to the sister and she told me about Paul. I believe that she was the one who told me about Paul.
Okay.
Cousin.
Well, go back to your story
Yeah. So anyway, in the early days and weeks of this, I was messaging with my cousin. It was like he became.
And this is Paul.
He's
joined us too. He's
okay. Hi, Paul. So Paul was my, Nicole and Steve and Paul and Kelty, and you kind of became a part of my support system because he was. Well, actually, I think you came in a little bit later on, but he was like just super high anxiety, just like, this is so not good. And there was a lot of tension around that. And so, every day I'd be messaging Paul and just.
Okay, wait, what was Paul's role in your life? Had you known he was an apostate? What were your perceptions of Paul prior?
No,
You thought he was a faithful Mormon?
Yeah.
So then what made you, how'd you find out he was different?
Kelty.
So you go to Kelty and Kelty says what?
Paul's safe.
Talk to Paul.
Talk to Paul.
Why didn't Kelty talk to you?
I did talk to Kelty as well. Okay. I did talk to Kelty as well. But I think
What's the need for Paul though?
So he was kind of feeding me okay, you've read this now, or I would ask him a lot of questions and he was
mentoring you.
He was mentoring me. And I would say, okay, well, what about this? Or, well, what about this? Or how did you deal with this? Or a lot of times, I'm just so sad. I just don't know if I'm ever going to be happy again. And so he would kind of help walk me through, okay, I'm learning more about this. What's a good resource for this? Or he would recommend books to learn. So he was kind of walking me through step by step. And then I'd be sobbing to Nicole. I remember one night I was, Skype talking to Nicole and Steve in the middle of the night, just crying so hard. And that was the time that I had reached out to you and just to say thank you. I was listening incessantly to the Mormon Stories podcast.
What types of Mormon Stories episodes were useful at the time?
Oh my gosh. Tom Phillips.
Why?
Because he loved the church so much.
Former stake president, received the second anointing.
Yeah.
Lost his faith, and then his family abandons him.
Yeah.
According to him.
Yeah.
Okay, who else?
Hans Mattsson, the Swedish Rescue, all of that.
Former area authority from Sweden. Mm-hmm. After all that, and a second anointing.
Yeah, and again, as someone who loved the church, that made me feel very safe because I didn't know anything but the church. And, but I'm an honest person, And so I'm learning these things and I'm like, what am I going to do? So it was really good to hear from Janine Jesperson Clark.
Christine Jepson Clark.
Christine Jepson Clark.
Yeah.
I have
So the faith transition stories were big for you.
Were huge for me. Let me see. The Family Ties Mormon Story, that's a really, really good one. That was later on after. There were some Daughters of Mormonism podcasts that I really liked. Yeah, those are some of the ones I've listened almost to every one of them by now. I mean, there were
the Johnsons and the Checketts, just a shout out to them. So, okay.
Yeah.
That was, we did two couples.
Oh, yeah.
Where the sisters were.
Yeah. That was a huge
married former mission
one
companions, and that's a great one too.
That's such a good one.
Yeah.
I just listened to them all day in my ear if I wasn't reading something. So that was kind of like in the beginning. And then do you want to kind of take over on how you were feeling during that time?
So yeah, I think as Leah got further into it, I felt increasingly threatened. We had some heated discussions where the emotions are high around this topic, right? But it wasn't. There was certainly tension. We weren't fighting a lot over it, but there was tension there. I felt uncomfortable with her desire to explore. I felt really uncomfortable that she wasn't spending more time in the Fair Mormon website, trying to balance out what was happening, and then finally one day she said to me, she said, Cody, listen. If the church is not true, would you want to know? And I thought, yeah, if the church isn't true, I would want to know that. She said, do one thing, just read the CES letter. And I said, okay, I'll read the CES letter.
And what did you feel before reading it?
Oh, angst. I was very anxious.
What were you fearing?
Like, this is a landmine. I'm about to walk through a landmine. And I just hope that I can get to the other side unscathed and keep my family, strong on the covenant path, if you will. And so we did. At night, we spent maybe a week or so at night together, reading the CES letter together. And then the letter to my wife, we read that together. And
his palms would be sweaty. He would be like,
yeah, I was having like
shaking.
a visceral reaction to what was going on.
Like as we're reading. And we had to go to every single footnote in the entire letter.
Because it was so unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe what was happening. What I was reading, what I was seeing, how at the age of 40 do I have no idea. No idea that Joseph practiced polygamy in this way, that his relationship with his, and again, not that I can understand from the historical data exactly how his relationship with his wife was, but it clearly it was so different from how I was taught through the correlated church curriculum.
Things like he lied to Emma.
There's just there's so much there that
for those who haven't read it.
Yeah, so the issues that Leah has brought up, the origins of the church, the first vision account, and the origins of the Book of Mormon, and polygamy, polygamy in the early days of the church, and polyandry, and the Book of Abraham, and just I felt in some ways so duped, so stupid, how did I not even know about these things? But at the same time, for the last 15, 16 years, we've been so busy. We've been just at times in survival mode. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to just follow the program. It's a plug and chug. Just here we go. Just, sit the kids in the roller coaster car and off we go. Just stay in the car and we'll get to the end. It may be a topsy-turvy, adventure, mm-hmm. but we'll get there. And now for the first time, I'm considering is it possible? Just is it possible that there is data out there that I'm not aware of about the church? The history isn't exactly as I've been told. And I'm a father of teenagers. I'm a father of 4 children, and we've we've committed so much time of our lives to this point, and our intention is from here on forward to continue to do the same. And now I'm having all of this real cognitive dissonance where I'm realizing that there's just so much I didn't know, and that the things that I thought I knew were founded upon only partial truths, or founded on history or evidence that had been displayed, portrayed, and taught in very selective, specific, faith-promoting ways, such that it became evident over time, over a very short period of time, that it wasn't dishonest what the church was doing to me and to my family, to allow us to build our foundation upon partial truths, upon selective truths, upon selective history, and retelling of certain facts to portray it in a certain way. The betrayal began to set in, and the hurt, and the fear, just overwhelming fear. Like, what are we going to do? How are we ever going to be happy? How are we ever going to raise moral children in this world, in this lost and forsaken world? What are we going to do? It was gut-wrenching. I mean, we'd cry together. I'd hold Leah and she'd just sob. And she'd sob because she was just so sad. We were both so sad and scared, but just so sad to come to the realization, even in the beginning for me, not necessarily that the church wasn't what it claimed to be, but just that there was all this information that might possibly lead me to that conclusion. Just that thought was just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, so he started looking with me at the information very slowly, making sure that he's really doing the church essays and that he's really doing a lot on the apologetics website, making sure that he's super balanced, reading the footnote. Okay, well, where did that resource come from? Well, who is that person? Going through all this very, very, very carefully. And I'll never forget, last Christmas, we were wrapping presents on Christmas Eve, and we were listening to an interview given by this lovely couple, and they have a website called Truth is Restored Again. And they had an interview with one of the Quorum of the 12.
With a general authority. I don't think they state.
With a general authority, they would not state the name. And they're talking about this interview. And they said something like, I think he was saying that...
What they said is they were talking about the truth claims of the church. And this general authority said to them, in paraphrase, yeah, that one true church thing, the church PR department's always had a difficult time with that.
And Cody just
broke down. So I was like, general authority saying something like that? That just seems preposterous. I couldn't believe something like that would be said. Because to me, it was my world. It was absolutely the one and only true church. How could a general authority not agree with me on that?
Or just kind of so flippantly say, oh yeah, the PR department hasn't done a great job.
Yeah, why is that the job of the PR department? Truth is truth. You don't need a PR department to help everybody see the truth.
And this beautiful couple, I mean, they detail out everything that they had tried and they couldn't believe it and they couldn't believe it. And then they go and they sit with this general authority and they're like, this is the moment, right? Yeah. This is the moment where we get the answer, where our world isn't turned upside down again. And then he says that. So that was Christmas Eve last year, and
2017.
Yeah, 2017, and it was just really sad. But what happened is after that point, the backfire effect set in for Cody.
Tell us about that.
I was so reluctant to believe that it was possible. How could it be, is basically how I felt. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's not possible.
I'll just say, if you look at a really good resource is The Stages of Grief. It's the Kubler-Ross model of stages of grief. And it was sort of constructed, studying people who had someone die. But it turns out a faith crisis is a lot like a death. And so, the first stage might be shock. And then it might, you might have, feelings of anger. You might have feelings of depression. But one of the stages of grief is bargaining, which is where you're trying to negotiate, or denial. Denial is another phase. So between denial and bargaining, you have that initial shock, but it's not like, boom, you're out. It's more like, okay, this is too traumatic. This is too disruptive. Maybe I'll go back into denial and either go to apologetics or, just ignoring or other sorts of self-medicating, whatever it is, working extra. You can't accept that it's happened. And so you go into either denial or bargaining, where you either try and stuff the genie back in the bottle, or you try and use some sort of changing your faith or becoming more liberal or using apologetics to try and keep the inevitable from happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was that. It was, I feel horrible. And so that's the spirit departing. And this is Satan taking a hold of me. And this is dark and it's not good. And so I can't proceed any further because, this is dark. I feel that the spirit has left me, is how I would have characterized those first couple weeks of January 2018.
Yeah, so he sent me a note, a letter, an email, and he's just like, I'm done. I can't work. I can't sleep. I can't eat. And, I'm like in the depths of despair. And it was right around the time that you and I had that conversation. We had talked on the phone and I just like cried, right? Do you remember that? Like just screamed. I think I screamed at you, maybe not at you, but with you, towards you. And you just like...
Yeah, you did. You were lively.
Well,
right?
you were really gracious because I think Leah reached out just to thank you, John.
I had just reached out to thank
you for your podcast. They're really helpful and informative. And then you responded to her, and were very gracious to her. And so then,
which I hadn't expected.
Yeah.
And then I think I had messaged you, and I'm just like probably sobbing, right? Just like I can't believe this. My world is falling apart. Like my kids, like what are we gonna do? So you and I ended up on a call, and I just think I cried for an hour and a half, and you listened and you validated and you were just great. And I remember one thing that you said. I mostly remember me crying and being really upset. But then I remember you saying, this could be the greatest gift of your life. And I was like, I'm going to hold on to that. Like, I don't believe it, but I'm going to hold on. I'm going to hold on to it. I don't believe it because I just don't think I'm ever going to be happy again. I'm just so sad. Like, I just want to be happy again. And Paul would say, like, Paul kept saying, like, it's going to take 6 months for you to feel any joy again. It's going to take. So I was holding on to that too. Like, okay, maybe I'll feel happy again in 6 months. I hope, because John's smart and kind, and he said, and he knows people who are dealing with this all the time, and he said this could be a gift, and Paul said it's going to take 6 months, so I would hold on to that, But then I got this email from Cody maybe a couple days after you and I had talked, and he's like, I'm done. I'm living my life in the church. I mean, it was absolute. It was like, I am not doing this. I am not going there. This is so painful. The Spirit has left me.
Done learning these things.
Learning.
Not done in our marriage.
No, not done in our marriage. Like, I am closing the door on this.
Kind of doubled down.
He totally did.
What was that like? What were you thinking?
I've got to be the faithful one. I've got to be strong. Leah needs somebody who's going to stay strong, and I need to be in tune with the Spirit, and the Spirit is leaving me when I read these things. And so I can't continue to learn this and read this because I'm losing the Spirit.
And that is something so powerful and ingenious and insidious. When the church teaches us that contention is of the devil, and they teach us that the Holy Ghost is the same thing as good positive feelings like joy and warmth and peace and comfort, and then they associate Satan or the adversary with sadness or anger or confusion, right? Then that locks us in to an orthodox behavior pattern and an orthodox set of beliefs, because anything that doesn't feel good must be of the adversary. But the fact is, when you're confused, when you have been fooled, when you've been duped, when you've been let down, when your life has been turned upside down, when the entire foundation of your life is now crumbling, that is always going to feel awful. But that can actually be sort of creative destruction, in the sense that, yes, it feels terrible, like to have a baby. Yes, it feels terrible for a chick to break out of the shell. It's not fun. It's work, and it's painful and excruciating. But that can be the pain, just like with lifting weights, that can be the pain and the discomfort that leads to incredible awakening and growth and opportunity. But by associating any feeling of discomfort or sadness or anger or confusion with the adversary, it stunts growth. It limits our ability, because those emotions, it turns out, if you've seen the movie Inside Out, you know that we have sadness for a reason. We have anger for a reason. We have confusion for a reason. Those are healthy emotions that have evolved with us over millennia, because they teach us things. They alert us to things. They teach us lessons. They help us grow. And those emotions are crucial. And so by walling off, by firewalling, and then condemning and stigmatizing an entire range of emotions, the church can keep people locked in a very unorthodox, immature, and unhealthy mindset that keeps them from growing. And I think that's kind of what you fell privy to.
Yeah.
And I knew that right when I got it. I knew, that it feels horrible to think that of all that we've ever learned could be not true. And I knew that he was just scared, and it actually pushed me into learning, like really kind of going into podcasts that talk about the bite model, that talk about sort of how the programming works in other religions, right? And what that looks like. And so that I could really kind of understand what was going on with Cody. And, some of our hope for this is that we can really, offer some tools for people, right? Because I think this is very, very common when someone goes and they're married and one person is learning all this stuff and having some different thoughts and views, and the other person's really scared and threatened, and maybe they learn a little bit or maybe they don't, but they double down in their belief, right? And it's called the Backfire effect. And so I did learn about that. And then at the time I had a session with you, and you shared how common that was. And your recommendation to me was to create, you had said that there's some, I don't know her name, but there's some famous therapist who said everyone's married 3 times. They're either married.
This is Esther Perel.
Esther Perel.
She wrote a book called The State of Affairs, where it talks about affairs. And in that book, she says, well, you go ahead and say it.
Everyone's going to be married 3 times. So they'll either be married to the same person or to a different person. Because you change, the conditions of your marriage change. And this was a time where at that point, I did not believe that the church was true. I did not. I had been incessantly reading for over a month. And I could support him. Because I was committed to the marriage. But I couldn't betray myself because I was taught to be honest. I was taught to have integrity, and it's not having integrity to pretend like something is true when from everything I can see, from all this massive amount of data, to me, it's no longer true. And I can't go against that inner value, but I can support him and love him. And so you had said, create a new marriage proposal. And I did. And I think that it would be helpful maybe for me to read that, because I think that it was the turning point. It was the turning point. Because he had gone into this place where he's not going to talk to me about this. I'm really scared because I'm like, oh gosh, like what does this mean for our family, our children? Like this is going to be difficult and this is going to be lonely, and I'm okay with that. But like, I just wanted to do everything the best I knew how. And this everything was new. And I didn't know what was the best thing to do. And this tool was so helpful for me and for us to get him to a place where he felt safe again. And so would you be okay if I read that?
Yeah. And I'll just say as just a precursor that what I was noticing with Leah and Cody is that as Cody retrenched and kind of went back to the sort of shutting out the information and becoming more orthodox, Leah was getting more and more angry and more strident and more, it's a cult, burn it down, and you have to be really careful, whether it's with your spouse, your children, your parents, believing family and friends. You can do this dynamic where you just push each other farther and farther apart, where you become more angry and strident, they become more devout and committed and orthodox, and it's completely counterproductive to the ultimate goals that you want, which is to come together. It's not whether you leave the church or not, believe or not. It's that can you together be unified in your relationship? Can you keep the marriage strong? Can you keep it from fracturing? Because if you push each other too far apart, it splits down the middle. So this intervention was my best Hail Mary pass at helping Leah stop pushing Cody so far apart that the marriage was going to fracture.
Yeah, because I was like, yeah, all of that. That's exactly right. And I was like, well, just listen to this. We'll just read this. We'll just do this, and it was just like pushing him away. Yeah. And so you had said the best thing you can do is to create this new marriage proposal and actually give him no information. Ask him to read nothing. Like, help him feel safe. He's just feeling really scared and really threatened. So I wrote this. I'll read it real quick. It says, "Dear Cody, I love you. And above all else," it brings back so many emotions, It was such a hard time. I hope I'll be able to read it. Okay, it says, "I love you, and above all else, I want to keep our family together." And I was scared, So it goes into talking about how, everyone's married 3 times to the same person or a different person. And I said that the foundation for our first marriage has collapsed because it was the church. That was the foundation. So I said, I have a proposal for a new foundation, for a foundation for a new marriage together. I want to have even a better marriage than we did before. And I think more accurately, I would say at that point, I had a lot of hope that we can make that happen. I would like to, I said, but for me, our mutual foundation or common bond can no longer be rooted in Mormonism. I said, here's my proposal for our new foundation. Number 1, unconditional love. And this means that I don't love you because of your relationship to the church, and you don't love me because of my relationship to the church. Moving forward, our love, respect, admiration, appreciation, etc. is not based on if the church is true or not true. I love you for you, and you love me for me. Fidelity. We're going to be faithful to each other because our most important core values are still intact, and they're both important to us. Honesty, with healthy, safe boundaries. Right now, we're both feeling unsafe about talking to one another about church things. There are many layers and years of pain for both of us for different reasons. Therefore, a boundary around religious discussions is what is going to be best for us both right now. Meaning we just can't talk about it. Emotional intimacy. There are many ways to develop emotional intimacy that are not religious-based. I promise that we will work to strengthen those during a phase where we're staying away from the realm of intimacy about religion. The timeout rule. This means that if we're engaging in an argument, or if one person is somewhat feeling out of control, either of us can call a timeout, and we'll be respectful to the person who's called a timeout. Does this sound familiar, John?
Yeah, because Margie and I were having to implement that rule ourselves at the time. I got that from a coach, and I shared that with you.
Yeah, it was so helpful. So we'll take a timeout, and we'll honor that. We'll separate, we'll calm down, we'll do soothing activities, and we'll give one another space for however long it takes before coming back to the discussion. This might be hours or it might be days. Love of our children. This will never change. It's a priority for both of us. I now believe that our difference can actually help provide a safer environment for our children to ask and explore and share. I believe that through this, we will become closer to our children. And statistics show that over 50% of kids are leaving the church today. And so having a mixed faith marriage can actually be really good for them. Freedom to talk and get help. I need to be able to talk about what I'm going through so that I can move through this in a healthy way. It's quite impossible for me to share my experiences without mentioning how you factor in. You are intertwined throughout every detail of this experience. I have talked to John about these details because he is safe. He's a disconnected person who does not know us, and he's not a part of our daily life. And I ask that you respect me and my privacy and allow me to get the help that I need to work through this. Similarly, if you want to talk to someone, I want you to know that you can always talk about me and whatever details you choose to share with a safe person. I want you to know that if you will marry me again under these new terms, please consider what I have to share, and I want you to add any additional terms that you feel like are important to consider. I want you to know that I do not believe in a plan of salvation that would break a family apart when any person of that family lives an honorable, upstanding, honest, charitable life, but can no longer believe in a religion because they have sought to pursue truth as they see it. Because of this, I am not fearful about my eternal salvation or ability to be with my family forever. When we talk to the children, I want you to know that I will not attempt to convince them of anything. I will also not give them more information than they are asking for. If they ask, I am committed to explaining things in reasonable terms and responsible terms that are age appropriate. We will both have to be able to tell the kids what we think and how we feel. I'm committed to the kids having their own journeys. If they feel like either of us are trying to control or manipulate them, they will resent that person and be pushed away. Moving forward, I am committed to creating a safe environment for you. For now, I will be attending church with you and with our family. I want to be there with you and with the children. This may or may not change, and some weeks I might need to take a break because it's really hard right now. But my desire is to be supportive of you and for our family. I've shared some resources with you, but please, before I stop sharing, read these couple of things. I just had to get a couple of other things in there. And I said, take your time to consider these things. I believe that we can agree on these principles and any that you add to guide us into a new phase of our marriage. I have so much hope, and I love you so much. So it just brought up, it was just so difficult. It's so scary to be in the darkest place of your life and then to realize you can't share that with the closest person to you. And knowing that the only way to keep it, to do this the right way would be to cut that. But I knew I needed to do that, because it was my greatest hope at having my marriage be as healthy as possible.
Everybody's responding that they love this letter and they want a copy. So Leah and Cody will be sharing a copy of this letter.
We have several letters
in the show notes. Yeah. But that was a beautiful letter. Cody, what was it like to read that from your retrenched Orthodox sort of shutting off your mind perspective? Like, could have gone many ways.
Yeah, it could have. Sorry. The defenses all came down. It just all, I don't know why, I don't know how. But it just all crumbled. My defenses crumbled at that point. And I don't remember my exact response to her, but to me it was beautiful. To me it made sense. I thought it was a wonderful way to proceed forward in the situation that we were in. And I've always valued Leah immensely for her good judgment, for her desire to do good and to be good. And it was so clear that that's all she was trying to do. So it was, I don't know why. I don't know why I reacted that way. I could have just been more hurt and more sad that now I was going to be in a mixed faith marriage, which is not the plan, and this isn't the way I envisioned my life. Could have become more entrenched, but it didn't happen that way. I didn't feel threatened. I felt safe. I felt like it was clear that she honored me, and I wanted her to know above all that I do honor her, and that I respect her, that she has freedom and an agency to choose to live how she wants to live. I can't control her. I have no desire to control her. Is it what I want? No, but I honor her. And so I think that was my response, is that this is beautiful. I'm 100% on board with this. I think this is the healthiest way to proceed forward.
And what was that like to get that response, Leah?
Oh, I was just so grateful. I was just like, okay, I can do this. I can do everything I can to honor my truth and honor him. I'm like, I will do whatever it takes. I will go to the ends of the earth to make this work and to make it work for our children. And I was so grateful. I mean, it was just it was a good day because, there were so many sad days, and it was a good day. It was a really good day. So
just the anatomy or the pillars of that letter, there are a few things that just come to my mind. One is make them feel safe. When they feel safe and loved, they're going to let their defenses down, and their hearts are going to open. Whereas if they feel threatened, they're going to put up walls and put up armor. And then the second is focus on common values. When someone leaves the church, they usually are still 99% the same person. They still believe in honesty and integrity and marriage and children and health and wellness, etc. So in the letter, focus on what unites you, on reassuring the other person. You're not going to go all of a sudden go crazy and start becoming an alcoholic and a drug user and cheating on the marriage, etc. Reinforce the common values that you still share, even outside of the Orthodox perspective. So build on common values and beliefs, and then if you can make sacrifices and accommodations. I love that part about you'll still go to church with them for as long as you can until you can't. You're going to be patient. You're going to be supportive. All those types of accommodations, instead of rushing to not pay the tithing, rushing to start bringing beer in the home, rushing to experiment sexually or drugs or whatever it is, do all that you can to make the other person not feel threatened and to say, I needed space and time. I will give you space and time to work things through. I'm not going to make big lifestyle choices that feel very alarming and threatening. And then end with just a recommitment, sort of saying this can be a new birth, a refreshing new birth that even gives us a better opportunity. And that little bit about the mixed faith family is so true. More and more and more, everyone's going to have a mixed faith family, or they're going to be leaving the church. It's just, this is an epidemic. And so it's a really good play to just say, well, so many kids are leaving the church. What a better way to model in our family that love transcends everything, to show that mommy can believe one thing and daddy can believe another, and the kids can believe what they believe, but we're all going to put love first. And ultimately, isn't that a Mormon concept, to love one another and to put family first? And so those are just some of the components. And I was just thrilled that it worked, because at the time I was just grasping for straws.
It was so helpful. It was such a turning point for us. Yeah. But that kind of led Cody into going back into the rabbit hole. So, I mean, it was just, but then we were both really in it. I think before, Cody was questioning the integrity of every single person who was maybe on a podcast or well, is this, just in that space of is it true? Like, how can it be true? And like going through Thinker of Thoughts Jonathan Streeter, he does some great videos on understanding how your brain is suffering, and like all of that, the bite mark, like all of that was so gripping for both of us at the beginning, especially I think for Cody, feeling, the feeling the priesthood sort of need to lead. And, I think there was that extra burden to make sure that we all got back safely. We followed the plan, and he was so committed, and he was so, I think that was a play more for him. But after this letter, we both were just, it was like nothing else. We didn't want to do anything else but learn and read. Nothing. Just podcasts in our ears, books in our fingers. It was just all of our discussions centered around it. But what then became the most painful part of this by far. I mean, you think, I had thoughts of, I'm going to become a threat to all of these people just by leaving. I mean, my family, maybe I don't know what they'll do. Maybe they won't want to see me. Maybe they want to be involved with my children. Our friends in the ward and my kids' friends, there's all of those. But what trumped all of that, and knowing that it would affect my business, what trumped all of that was, how are we going to tell our kids? Like, whenever I look back on this, think about it, it was like, I think it is so deeply immoral that I'm going to have to sit and tell my children this, and I know that I am going to break their heart. And we would go through these scenarios, like, what are the options? Like, it was this circular conversation. We would shake and weep in the fetal position in bed, just like, I can't believe we're going to have to do this. And is there any way around it? Is there any way? Could we stay? Is it possible? How could we work this? Could we stay in and still be honest? But then that's going to become a problem for, like, how are we going to, how are we going to do this? And the Mormon Transitions podcast were really, really helpful, where mental health professionals walk you through what are age-appropriate ways to share these things with your kids. We clung onto those Mormon Transitions podcasts. They were like gold. And, and talking with you, professional help from people who are aware of how to navigate something like this. And that was the deepest, most painful part of it all, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just knowing.
How do you tell your kids, when you have been guiding them down this path for their whole life, and now you're going to come to them and say, this, we've got to change course, and it's a significant course correction. And, but I still initially wasn't at that point yet. I was just, okay, Mormon Stories Podcast, okay, different podcasts, okay, reading more, trying to understand more, listening to these Mormon transitions, because I knew, if nothing else, it's messier than I thought it was. At a minimum, right, there's a messier history than I was ever aware of. And
so Cody at this point, he hadn't come to any conclusion. This conversation is just like, if we're going to proceed as honest people, how does that look in our family? It wasn't we're leaving the church. No. Cody had never even said to me anything along the lines of, I don't believe it's true. Nothing. Like, he was so cautious. I mean, he had read so much and listened to so much that it was like fascinating to me that he was still not able to come or willing or capable of making any statements, any conclusions. And I honored that. I just said, we will take all the time you need. We will get to a place where you feel good before we say anything to the kids. There is no rush here. We've been in it our whole lives. There's no need. We're going to wait till we feel ready. Until then, they don't need to know anything. And we just want to do this the best way we can. That's how we are. We want to raise the kids the best way we can. We want to tell them about this the best way we can. The turmoil of knowing weighed so heavily on us that it literally, I've never felt my heart like ache. Like physically, I would go through my days I would just cry, Just like, we are going to have to literally sit in front of our kids and break their heart. If we want to be honest.
Because what were your kids, how were they enjoying church? What was their relationship to the church, at this moment, when they weren't aware of anything? What was the church meaning to them? How were they engaging the church?
So at this point, they were 14, 11, 9, and 5, 8 and 5. But so the older two were more involved in the church, in the young women's activity days. Brinley, who was 14, was very, very much involved. She was in seminary. She was at Mutual every week, service projects. She was there. She was in, the class presidencies for the young women's and
baptisms for the dead.
And we were.
Were they loving it? Were they enjoying it?
Yeah, as far as we could tell, yeah.
They didn't know anything different. It was
just like you guys, right?
Yeah, it was like.
There were grumblings on Sunday mornings sometimes,
like
but it's normal. But for the most part, we were always there. If there was an activity, we all went. The kids wanted to go. We weren't feeling like we were having to drag them to do things within the church. We all were involved and enjoying it and all in. So that was, and we were constantly, as we've discussed, trying to mold the trajectory, the future. Here's where we're going. I have 3 siblings who returned from missions, 2 sisters and a brother, and we flew each of them out here to our home for a week because we wanted them to be with our girls. We wanted our girls to be touched by them, influenced by them, to hear the mission stories and to have that dream and aspiration of serving a mission like Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so. And so that, we were trying to do our best to set them on the path, the trajectory that would take them to the temple marriage and beyond.
Yeah. So that was the next frontier, huh? Is figuring out what to say to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's fortuitous because we're like right at the end of the 4-hour limit that Facebook Live gives us to do an episode. So we're about 4 hours in minus that little 10-minute interruption where it's time to bring on Brinley. So why don't we just talk about your decision to have Brinley come on Mormon Stories and what people are about to hear. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll relaunch a new Facebook Live stream. And tell us what we're about to hear and how you got to feeling like you wanted to go this route with your story.
The first thing, I don't know what exactly we're at, but there are a few. Was the Jack Welch after? Was it after this? Okay. What was the question?
Brinley.
I'll answer.
Oh, yeah.
So eventually, as we'll discuss, we get to the point where our feelings about the church are more closely aligned. And then the discussion is we've got to tell the kids. And everybody has to approach that situation in their own way, right? Every family is unique, and by no means are we the example. But as we talked about what to do, how do we do it? Leah mentioned, do we just stay in the church, raise them in the church, let them go off to college, and then kind of find their own way? And we both came back to honesty. We have to be honest with them. What if someday Brinley grows up, marries the return missionary in the temple, and then she stumbles upon this, goes through her own Mormon faith crisis, and heaven forbid, her husband says, "I'm out. I need a faithful wife in the church." And she loses her marriage and her family, and then she comes to us and we say, "Oh, well, yeah, we knew this. We just didn't tell you." Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I couldn't live with that kind of guilt.
I couldn't live for 3 weeks not telling. It was hard for me that time from finding out. every day was hard for me. So like we would try and bring up these scenarios where, okay, well, what if we don't tell them? And then what would that look like? But the truth is like, I felt dishonest in my own home with my own children because it's dishonest to not be honest, And so I think we knew that couldn't be a possibility, but we were trying to explore all these avenues that felt so much more comfortable than just being honest. But we always kept arriving back at, there's no way, how do you get around honesty in the right way with integrity intact? How does that happen?
But hopefully the next segment, we can talk about how we've done that as a family and Brinley can share her experience of what that was like, because she's been remarkably mature, in our opinion, through this whole process. It's been really, really hard for her in unique ways that we can't quite explain, but hopefully she can.
But what else I'm excited to go into, though, is sort of how, from a parenting perspective, we kind of moved from a place of so much fear about losing the church. I mean, I was like gripped with fear about going into, we're not, there's the church and the world and I've always been such an intentional parent and values are so important to me. And sort of how did we journey from feeling so fearful to losing the church into feeling like we've become better parents than we could have been. Our family has gone through something that has made us so much closer, so much healthier, so much happier. Our marriage has changed. Our relationship with our kids has changed. And that's sort of the journey that we'll go on. How did we get from sobbing in our bed, dark days, just gripped with fear and sadness into the place that we're at now, which is completely different. It's just completely different.
And tell our audience really quickly, what you're about to see, audience, is Brinley Young, 15 years old? Mm-hmm. 15 years old. She is going to tell her perspective on this whole experience. She was 14 years old when all of this erupted in her family. Some people might, this is exploitative, or it's just a teenager, or whatever. This isn't sort of just coming out of how do we, cover new territory. So what was your decision as parents that made you feel like you wanted to maybe talk to Brinley, or was it Brinley's idea? How did this come about that Brinley became interested in an interview, and why would you allow that to happen? Really briefly, in just 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, so, the experience was incredibly traumatic for Brinley, devastating, and she'll go into that. And I'm sure it'll be a bit emotional. It was very, very devastating. And she received help. She received counseling from your wife, Margie, which was just everything to her. And she, and we had Mormon stories, but there wasn't a lot of kids her age going through this. She had talked to a few kids, and that was so helpful. But it was like, if there was a child, right, she felt that. If there was a child who had been going through this, what would she have given to hear that voice? And so she actually, when she found out we were going to do this, she asked to be on it, and she wanted to be on it. And Cody was very worried about her being on it, and he didn't want her to be on it. And we had a conversation here in the great room, and she cried, and she said, because he's so worried about the backlash and what could happen. And she just cried and she just said, Dad, I can help people. I can help people. And if I can help people, then I'll take whatever criticism comes my way because I can make a difference for people.
And so in just a few minutes, we will be relaunching this next segment of this epic interview with Cody, Leah, and Brinley Young, where Brinley's going to talk about the faith crisis from her standpoint. And then we're all going to talk about how this wonderful family has moved from fear into joy, and how this faith crisis has in fact become a gift for all of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So don't go away. Stay tuned to the Mormon Stories Podcast Facebook feed. Stay tuned to your iPods, your iPhones, whatever you have. We'll be right back with more goodness from Leah, Cody, and Brinley Young. Yep. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in so far. You've made it a great episode. Hi to Julie Steenbeckers-Johnson. She just joined us. And thank you guys for a wonderful several hours so far.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
See you guys soon.